Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Check with Joseki Tech. I'm Adam Studley, the president of Joseki Tech.
Hi, I'm Dan. I'm the VP for Application Development at Joseki Tech.
Hey guys, I'm Jasmine. I am the Director of Marketing here at Joseki Tech.
Today, we're going to be looking at some new features that Dan whipped up for us to better tune our Gen AI sales and marketing email generator. So just by way of motivation, before we dive in here, what we've looked at so far in other episodes is kind of before and after with one change. So last week we looked at adding the skills and the positions for the customer into the data mix to see what the result was. We've looked at changes to the knowledge base. We looked at changes to the starting instructions for the agent. But each of these tunes have been sort of one step at a time. And largely we've been showing that we can build up the plumbing that we need to do this whole job. Now that we've got that baseline set, we really got to accelerate how quickly we're able to tune things. And looking at one example at a time really isn't enough. So we wanted to do some way to do these in batch, where you could take the same group of customers, look at a result, tune something, repeat till we're happy with the tuning. Then we can move on to another batch of customers to see if we're happy with the result there. So Dan, you want to show us what we got?
Okay, so what we have here is a standard Spring Boot test case. The line I have commented out here was the first approach where I was just picking 3 random contacts and proceeding forward with those and doing the generation. Then I got to the point where I wanted to pick specific contacts. So what you're seeing here is 3 specific contacts picked.
Yeah, when we're doing iterations of this, it's going to be important to look at the same records over and over so we can see how those improve. So the random is good for just a quick test, but for starters, we want to have a consistent set every time.
So what we'll do here is we'll just go ahead and play this.
Now, we didn't put an interface around this because, I've got IntelliJ on my machine and I'm the guy that's going to be running it principally. So it was just as easy to do this. As we have more members of the team using it, we'll probably put some kind of, web interface around this, but that's pretty mechanical.
Yep, the team's already working on a web app and an administrative backend, so we should be able to stand you up a UI there. I think you'd asked me this before at some point, but we are generating these in parallel, so it's not serially 1, 2, 3 reaching out to OpenAI. We actually have a standard Java executor service here under the covers. So all 3 of those kind of went in parallel. So where you would see it usually takes 20 to 30 seconds one time around, we're kind of only as slow as our fastest man, fast as our slowest man. Okay, the application ran. If you're really paying attention, it kicks something out here in the output. So let's go ahead and take a look at this and open it in the browser so you can actually see what it looks like. And it's a little rudimentary to start with here. We've only picked 3 contacts, so I just very quickly laid them out on the screen so that you could see it. A couple of quick links so you could jump down to one. When you jump down to it, you can see the first name, the contact, the subject line that was generated, the content that was generated for them. And then if you're really curious, you can extend, drop down the prompt accordion here and you can see the exact prompt that was fed into AI.
Yeah, so that'll let you see what the data was around this particular customer that was passed in.
Yeah, looking closely, you can see that the skills and the positions were tacked in here at the end.
Excellent. So I imagine we're going to be doing rounds of, 25 to 50 at a clip and marching our way through all the critical elements we have in our ecosystem. So looking more tightly at our starting instructions. One place I think we've got a lot of area for improvement is in our knowledge base. We only have maybe 5 or 6 pages of text about Joseki Tech in there, and we need to bulk that up so we have more about our products and our skill set for it to pull from. And then I think there's some playing we're going to wind up doing about the tone of the message as well to make sure we're really getting an example that we like well in there. And I think that's going to all come together to get a better and better email with each pass.
Yep. We have all that on the horizon. Jasmine's working on giving us a little better best practices from a knowledge-based perspective. And I believe in the next week, we're also going to meet with industry expert to review our prompting approaches.
A question, actually. So the best way to send these out once you've generated them in batches would be to copy and paste them individually into the HubBoost, into the email section, or what is the go-to way that we are currently sending out these batches of emails, or that we would theoretically send out these batches of emails that we are making. Because as we saw previously, like, yes, it may have all of this great information in there, but it does always still need a tweak. And especially if you are making them in batches, like each individual one is going to need a little bit of a tweak.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jasmine. We're still really thinking that for us, we're going to be sending them out through that same interface with HubSpot, where someone is looking at it and giving it a final read and then tweaking it with some feedback before shipping it. This is, as a baseline, not so much for sending out the batch, but for tuning the engine, so that when we're tuning, we're not doing one at a time, we're doing 25 at a time. So we can see over broader things where those are going. I do think there's an interesting use case about sending, so we can see more of the errors at once. We can see when it does go off the rails. If we want to be sending these in batch, which I think for our use case is not something that we would do, but I think other customers may want to have a fully automated solution. And the way I think of that is that line between when is it a marketing email and when does it start to be a sales email. You kind of try to push it so that there's one more marketing email, namely generated and not a real person there, but it's starting to feel more like your sales guy is interacting with you. So from that perspective, we'd want to run this tool and run through 100 examples, read all of them, and make sure none of them look distasteful. We don't see hallucinations. We don't see anything that looks blatantly an error or bad. And once we feel like we can do, 100 without an error, then I think we would start to feel comfortable for automating it for sending thousands. But you still want to keep an eyeball on it.
When we get to scale, it kind of is what it is. You can't eyeball 100,000 of them, right? So we can have a human in the loop for a certain percentage of cases, and then we might want to think about doing what the industry's doing, and we kind of use AI to do AI. If you look at the way ChatGPT works, after it generates something, basically it gets shoved right back into ChatGPT to then scrub it for profanities, and whatnot. So we could kind of do the same thing here. We could then have another assistant or another AI loop that does exactly that. It checks it.
Okay. Interesting concept.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a good core of our process about sort of improving things. There is one other aspect we haven't talked about yet, and that's something we're going to look at in a future pod, and that's fine tuning. So, Dan, can you give us the basics of what fine tuning is?
Yeah, and we're marching towards that end here. So the deal with fine tuning is you take a model like ChatGPT 3 or 4 or Turbo or whatever, and you kind of want to teach it some of your special sauce. You want to have that baked in. So what you'll do is take a couple hundred samples and then run through. You'll generate a couple hundred samples and you'll weight them. You're basically going to tell the engine feedback-wise whether they were good or bad. We'll upload those and use those and a feature called fine tuning in order to then generate a new model. It'll be a proprietary model there or be a trained model, a tuned model at that point. And then we'll configure our system to use that model going forward.
Yeah, so we're going to use this bulk process first to get us closer to where we see the end result is, and then we'll apply some of the fine tuning as the final step. And what I think is going to be most interesting about that in that episode is fine tuning is not available in the latest and greatest version of ChatGPT, right? It's not in Turbo 4, but it is available in 3.5.
Yeah, I think there's certain models. I'm not 1,000% sure right now, but the documentation is indicating that it's not available to tune the 4 model.
So it'll be interesting to see.
Or it's in beta, right?
We should back all this up because it's not going anywhere. We're currently using ChatGPT 4 Turbo for generating these, and right now it's at best in beta for the fine-tuning features. So another interesting thing we'll be able to look at is how does our model do fine-tuned in 3.5 versus how it does unfine-tuned in 4, which is interesting kind of from a pricing perspective, as well as seeing how far along the models are going.
Yeah, so once we start fine tuning, baking that stuff in, it's kind of all about the tokens, right? We get charge by token. So once we start baking that stuff into the model, we'll no longer have to include it in context or the knowledge base or, sneak it into the thread in some other way. It'll just be baked in.
And we'll see how that does for us. So thanks everyone for coming by today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks all. Bye.